Napoleon Bonaparte, once the most powerful man in Europe, a military genius and the ruler of an empire stretching from Spain to Russia. But what if I told you that his greatest threat wasn't just his enemies but his allies? Today, on Country of History, we're diving into the betrayal that led to Napoleon's dramatic downfall. It's 1807, and Napoleon Bonaparte is at the height of his power. With victory after victory on the battlefield, he's built an empire that spans most of Europe. The nations of Prussia, Austria, and even Russia have been defeated, and Napoleon has forced them to sign alliances with him. He's untouchable, a ruler feared and respected across the continent. Napoleon's empire was held together by force, not trust. His allies were nations he had defeated, and they had been given little choice but to support his ambitions. Prussia, Austria, and Russia, for example, had all been defeated in war and forced into alliances. But these alliances were fragile, built more on fear than loyalty. Napoleon's policies strained his allies to their limits. He demanded loyalty, soldiers, and resources from them to fuel his campaigns, especially his disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812. His continental system, a trade blockade against Britain, hurt the economies of his allies just as much as his enemies. The more Napoleon pushed, the more his allies began to question their allegiance. In 1812, Napoleon made a bold but ultimately catastrophic decision. He invaded Russia, hoping to force the Tsar into complete submission. But this campaign would be the beginning of the end. Napoleon marched into Russia with over 600,000 men, the largest army Europe had ever seen. However, the Russian strategy of scorched earth left his troops starving and vulnerable. By the time Napoleon reached Moscow, the city was abandoned and set on fire. With no supplies and winter setting in, Napoleon had no choice but to retreat. The retreat from Russia was brutal. Freezing temperatures, starvation, and relentless Russian attacks decimated his army. Of the 600,000 men who had marched into Russia, only about 100,000 made it out. This devastating loss weakened Napoleon's power and gave his allies an opening. They saw that the once invincible emperor could be defeated, and they started plotting to free themselves from his control. The betrayal former allies joined forces. Sensing weakness, Napoleon's former allies turned against him. Prussia and Austria, once defeated and humiliated by Napoleon, joined forces with Britain and Russia in a new coalition. They saw this as their chance to break free from his influence and restore their own power in Europe. The coalition launched a series of attacks against Napoleon's forces, starting in Germany in what became known as the War of the Sixth Coalition. Napoleon's weakened army was no match for the combined forces of Europe. At the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, also called the Battle of Nations, Napoleon faced a massive united force. After 4 days of intense fighting, Napoleon was defeated and forced to retreat to France. The final blow, Napoleon's exile to Elba. After the disastrous loss at Leipzig, Napoleon's situation only worsened. His allies closed in, and by 1814, they had pushed into France itself. In Paris, the French government was in disarray, and public support for Napoleon was fading. Seeing no other option, he abdicated his throne in April 1814. The once great emperor was exiled to the small island of Elba, a mere shadow of his former glory. His empire had collapsed, betrayed and broken by the very nations he had forced into alliances. Yet, even in exile, Napoleon's ambition wasn't entirely defeated. The 100 Days and Waterloo, the final stand. In 1815, Napoleon escaped from Elba and returned to France for a brief final attempt at reclaiming power in what became known as the 100 Days. He gathered support and rallied an army, but his former allies were ready. The coalition, led by Britain and Prussia, mobilized once again to stop him. The showdown came at the Battle of Waterloo, where Napoleon faced the Duke of Wellington and a Prussian army led by General Blücher. Despite his tactical genius, Napoleon was decisively defeated. His second reign was over as quickly as it had begun. This time, there would be no second exile close to home. Napoleon was sent to the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend the rest of his life, far from the Europe he had once dominated. Legacy and lessons. Napoleon's story is one of incredible ambition, military brilliance, and ultimately, tragic downfall. His attempt to conquer Europe united his enemies, but it was the betrayal of his allies, nations he once forced into submission, that delivered the final blow. Napoleon's downfall reminds us that power built on fear and force is always fragile. In the end, his allies turned enemies not only cost him his empire but also his place on the world stage. And though he was exiled and defeated, Napoleon's legacy lives on as a figure of ambition, strategy, and a cautionary tale about the price of domination. So what do you think? Was Napoleon's downfall inevitable, or could he have maintained his empire? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching Country of History. Subscribe for more stories of power, betrayal, and the events that shaped our world.